how to say your last name, so I'm going to just shoot for the moon. Barbara Jarnigan?
Yes. Well done. Look at
Perfect.
you.
Who is the
Well done.
Associate Director of Education, I believe is your job title for the Mystic
Yes.
Seaport
Yep.
Museum. And if you weren't with us when we were starting and just chatting in the background, Barbara's been with them for 35 years. Um, which just such a long time dedicated to museum education. She is a very passionate educator from the stories that she was sharing. So I can't wait for you guys to go on this tour with Barbara and her team. So Barbara, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. So I've got an interesting technical question for Chris. Is there any way that I can see anybody's faces? I know we've got 47 participants in here. Um, let's see.
So unfortunately, we
Yeah.
have it so that all their cameras or microphones are turned off. Typically, especially because this webinar, we have 100 people registered. If we let people pop on and off, the screens and what people were looking at would get a little chaotic. But they all have the ability to chat with you in the chat, and they can send
Perfect.
direct messages to you and all that other good stuff.
This is almost like doing it with my eyes closed. This is sort of fun. Excellent. So, thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's been a hot day here at Mystic Seaport Museum in Mystic, Connecticut, right along the coastline. And I hear that it's been a little toasty where you guys are as well. So, I am going to hopefully where technology is going to behave with us today. I want to show you a quick video of what Mystic Seaport Museum is all about. And if it doesn't behave, then that is totally fine. We will move on to something else completely. And let's see. All right. So yeah, we've got about 17 acres of museum here. Consider ourselves a maritime museum, but we're also a history museum. We've got about 500 boats of different shapes and sizes in our collection. Many of them are in the river, right along the property, Mystic River. We talk about maritime trades and definitely preserving those skills of coopering and smithing and printmaking and wood carving. Um, and definitely, we've got our own preservation shipyard here at the museum because nobody can take care of a 200-year-old wooden ship like we can. We have the skills, we've got all the backup documentation from the 1700s and how to repair these vessels. So not only do we take care of our own historic vessels, but there are other museums along the eastern seaboard that actually bring their ships up to us so that we can do repair work and general maintenance on them as well. We have about 60 different exhibits, an outdoor museum. We've got about 60 different buildings. Most of them we've moved from other areas in New England to our site to sort of set up a recreated 19th century maritime community. So instead of me just telling you in our basement studio what Mystic Seaport is all about, I think that I've got two friends. One is Anthony, he's going to be our presenter today, and our camera woman is Molly. And they are actually in one of our exhibits. We're going to go to a couple different exhibits, take a walk around the museum grounds, see what it's all about. The sun is going to be setting in just about an hour. So towards the end of this tour, it'll be nice and quiet and hopefully a little bit cooler out there. But I am going to pin Anthony and I am going to have him take it away. Hey Anthony, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Barb. Thank you. And thank you for having me and letting me talk to you guys today about some of our favorite spots here at the Mystic Seaport Museum. Currently, I am actually in a bedchamber, kind of an interesting place to start. But as Barb had mentioned, our museum focuses not just on boats and where they're going, but the people impacted by maritime life and their families. So we are in a proper colonial house right now, the Buckingham Hall House. And we chose to start upstairs in one of our bed chambers because family life is certainly something we talk about in different spaces here at the museum. We know of children on board ships and supporting maritime industries, so that is certainly something we love to show off. Now, this bed chamber has a single bed in it that is a pretty reasonable size, I think, for any single modern person. But if we transport it back to the middle of the 18th century, this tall bed with the trundle underneath or the pull-out bed could sleep multiple children. We know that the family that owned this house, the Buckingham family, had 5 children. So I think it might be a tight squeeze, but in a cold New England winter, that might actually be a welcome source of heat. On a day like today, though, where it is a little bit warm here in the house, especially on the top floor, I think I might take the option that many young folk in the 18th century did and sleep outside in the barn. It is honestly a little stuffy up here right now. But as much as I would love to crack a window, I would be afraid of one fear that many people had throughout the 18th and 19th century, and that would be inviting bugs into the home. We do not have any screens on the window. As soon as we open it, it is the outdoors coming in. So if I wanted a cool breeze, I could even draw the curtains across the bed to act as a kind of bug net for myself. Now, I know we had talked a little bit about some of our different audiences here, specifically educational work with young visitors and children. There is one item in this room that I think commands more attention and questions than just about anything else, and it is actually under the bed. That is a chamber pot, a fixture of colonial life. Now, this house is equipped with an outhouse outside. When we get to the garden, you may see it. But as I've been talking about the weather on a really cold or damp winter night, I probably would not want to walk through the snow. And I think many people would agree with that. So I think we are going to move through the house a little bit and show off a couple of other rooms to you guys. And one is another shared family space. We are going to walk down towards the hall and take a look at some other spaces that the family is living in. All right, here we are in the hall, which is frequently the center of a home. It is where families can have meals, work on small projects, maybe some sewing or something in that realm. Informal meetings with company that you know very well could take place in a room like this. I find it to be the most comfortable room of the house. Now, this whole home is a very interesting one for us. It is actually comprised of 2 different buildings. The front half of the house that we have been in so far was constructed in the middle of the 18th century or the 1700s. The back half that we will get to in just a minute actually predates this house by over 50 years and is dated to the 1690s. So to put that in perspective, right around the time of the Salem witch trials. At some point throughout the house's history, the existing older structure was added to the front of this house to make a composite building that was super useful for the family. This house actually was not built here in Mystic. It did not exist in Mystic historically. This house came to us from perhaps about 40 miles away in a town called Old Saybrook, Connecticut. I know Barbara had mentioned our recreated village and how we moved houses here. This building, or this house in particular, was partially dismantled, put onto barges, and sailed down the Connecticut River right in the middle of our state into the Long Island Sound, making a lateral move across the coast of Connecticut, and then back up the Mystic River before being delivered here. We are fortunate enough to have some photographs of the house moving, so I will certainly highlight that once we make our way back into the kitchen. So if you guys want to follow me back, we are heading into the older half of the house, stepping back into the 1690s. Today, we interpret the house or have it staged to represent the early 19th century. I think the 1830s is a pretty good decade. So things were changing for people. We had been starting to move away from colonial practices and had moved a little bit towards modernity. But we are still a long way off, and I think the kitchen represents that better than any other space in the house. We are still cooking over an open hearth and fireplace. So Molly, I'm actually going to ask you to spin around on the fireplace here so I can show off the crane here. This is how we are regulating heat. When we are cooking over an open fire, you have options to make things hotter or colder, much the same way we do with our stoves today. And it is pretty easy to change the temperature. If I want this kettle closer to the fire, I am simply going to add another hook and set it closer to the fire. Or I could take away hooks if my water is boiled and I am ready to start making things. One item in this kitchen that I think is really cool is this. Now this, I would guess many people might not have seen one before, but I would bet that we have something very close in all of our homes today. This is a tin kitchen or a reflector oven. And what you would do is place a piece of meat on this spit and use it like a rotisserie, but it gets its heat reflected from the cooking fire. So I would place this item here and let the fire do its thing. And the cook times, I have checked with many people who do hearth cooking. The cook time is about the same as a modern oven today. So for example, I've seen pieces of like a small roast beef get cooked in about an hour here. So I don't think people were doing too terribly for themselves for the most part in the 1830s. I know I had mentioned some photos of the house moving, so I am going to place those on the table here so you guys can see a little bit of the journey that this building made to get here. to Mystic. So in just a minute, we will head outside and take a look at the garden. But there is one other item that I would really love to highlight in this kitchen, and it is actually a food item. So I am going to take this off. This is a very common food item, especially for New England in the 19th century. I actually might pose a question to the group, and I would say if you're in the chat, type a quick response. If anyone can guess what this is. And Molly, if you see anything.
Yeah, I'll let you know. Ham.
Ham is a great guess. It is an animal product, so I would say getting warmer. It is not a terrestrial animal. This thing exists in our.
Can you
Fried
can you show us
salmon.
the side view
So a side view or the back
or
of.
back view? Alice got it.
Yep, cod.
Yup. So I heard the magic word. This is a piece of salted cod. Salted cod is kind of a superfood. It doesn't really go bad. This particular piece was made here at the museum and has been hanging on this wall behind me for the better part of a decade. Salting food takes away any moisture and creates an environment where bacteria will not grow. So flies don't touch it, nothing is green or fuzzy. It could hypothetically still be edible today. It would take a lot of soaking to rinse all of the salt out and many, many water changes, but you could still make something with this. We know that salt cod like this was an export product of New England. Much of it was sent down to the Caribbean, where there were still sugar plantations by the middle of the 19th century. This was a fairly inexpensive food item, and it lasts so you can keep it and eat it through the winters as well, which is going to be really important, especially in a climate like ours that can change so quickly. So I am going to hang this back up and we will head to the garden. And now that we are outside of the house, I would open it up and say if there are any questions, please feel free to ask them as we go take a look at a couple of plants. Right, so here in the garden space of the house, we still maintain varieties of vegetables that would be eaten typically in New England. One that I am very partial to is the onion plants, something that would certainly exist in gardens all across New England. We even here in Connecticut have towns that are famous for onions, silly as that may be. So it is certainly a staple of the diet. Generally, people are eating hardier crops, things that would grow well and keep well. We are drying many things, including apples, potentially potatoes or herbs, maybe even taking advantage of a root cellar for some things as well. People in New England throughout the 18th and 19th century were still partly contending with survival throughout the months where you can't access your fields or your crops. Right now is kind of the perfect time for our garden. Everything is in bloom, everything is growing, and as we near the end of the summer, it will get less and less until we've harvested everything. And we still use vegetables out of this garden in our historic kitchen for open hearth cooking demonstrations at the museum. Every day there's food coming out of that kitchen, and I think it is so cool that we're able to keep doing that.
So Anthony, I've got a question.
Yes.
We need to know what were some of the primary occupations of the head of house in a seaport town?
Yeah, so the head of a household in a seaport town could be doing many things. There are a variety of jobs that help to support maritime industries. One that is coming to the forefront of my mind is actually blacksmithing or shipsmithing, making the metal parts for ships. So we are going to make our way down the street and head on over to our shipsmith.
Great, thank you.
I just need to take a quick second to compliment the backwards walking here. This is a difficult skill, I know from personal experience, and doing it on uneven ground outdoors is quite impressive.
Thank you. I frequently say it is a part of my job to walk backwards. I do like being able to keep an eye on some of our younger students while we're going from place to place. So I think I have a pretty good mental layout of the seaport at this point. As we are heading down the street here, there are some other typical fixtures of a town. Number one being a small chapel. This is the Fishtown Chapel. Another that I would highlight as we are walking is a little bit further behind me, and that would be our apothecary or a pharmacy, somewhere you can get products to heal sickness.
So Anthony, if this were a town from the 1880s, would you really be walking in the middle of the street like that?
No, I would not. Absolutely not. Not only could I get run down by a carriage or a horse, by the later half of the 19th century, I might even have to contend with an electric trolley or two. Maybe some children on a penny farthing bicycle coming down the street rather quickly. I think, too, our roads here are exceptionally clean for the 1800s. Without horses and animals walking through the streets, we are able to keep our roads nice and fresh. As we are rounding the corner here, we are coming up on our blacksmith shop. Now, I know we have discussed our buildings traveling from many different locations to get to us, and our shipsmith is no different. This building had a fairly long journey to get here. It was originally built in New Bedford, Massachusetts in the year 1885 and stayed in New Bedford as a working shipsmith really through the early 20th century. This building saw the decline of East Coast whaling and saw ships that we will talk about in just a minute come and go on a daily basis, supplying all of their iron needs.
While we're walking, someone asked how many buildings are there here?
So here we have about 60 different buildings, all shapes, all sizes, with many different functions. Some spaces are local to Mystic, others came from further out, but we try to utilize as many of them to their fullest as we can. All right, here we are in a space that is a particular favorite of mine, the James D. Driggs Shipsmith. So I told you guys so far, this building dates to 1885 and came to us from New Bedford, Massachusetts. The man who opened this building and ran it is Mr. James D. Driggs, who we have a photograph of on the wall behind Molly. So if you want to show off Mr. Driggs and his very large mustache, James D. Driggs was a career shipsmith. This is the type of work that he did for most of his life. This shop is actually something I refer to as a retirement project. Driggs had sized down considerably. His first shop had 5 forges or 5 fireplaces here. And our shop here only has 2. So he really did cut down his business, but he maintained working right up until his death. At that point, this shop changed hands and a couple of brothers, the Peters brothers, took it over and ran it right up until the 1920s. Some things in here that are particularly interesting to me are some of the tools that would be produced in this shop. So those and the ones I would like to focus on today with you guys are these. The iron whaling craft. So this is the head of a harpoon. This style is known as a double flue harpoon, meaning it has 2 distinct prongs, and it is essentially a giant arrow. This would be mounted onto a wooden handle standing probably a little over 8 feet tall. And these are the tools that defined the whaling industry. When we think of Moby Dick or we think of whaling, we think of the harpoon. This design is great. It was used for hundreds of years. In fact, some of the earliest whalers in New England, European immigrants in the 17th century, brought this style of harpoon with them. It does have one major drawback, and that is it doesn't work very well. With a harpoon like this, when you are trying to catch a whale, it creates a fairly large opening and can pull out. By the middle of the 19th century, shipsmiths were working on how to solve this issue and how to make their tools more effective. One idea was simply to cut it in half and make more of a hook shape. It is workable, but your odds are still not fantastic. And then, in the 1840s, a shipsmith in New Bedford named Lewis Temple decided to change the harpoon. He was not alone in this, but his changes were really influential. This harpoon does something special. It opens. This is a toggle iron, sometimes called a Temple toggle, and it is designed to ensure that you are keeping your catch. So when it is driven through a whale, it opens up, becoming wider than the hole that it created. So if you want to think of numbers, when I am thinking of the older styles of harpoon, I am expecting about a 30% success rate with that. With a toggle iron, that number is a lot closer to 80% success, or meaning catches that we are keeping and not losing. So it was a huge improvement in the industry and really ensured the industry's survival through the end of the 19th century. Something else that I would love to highlight in here is the forge itself. One of the two biggest tools to a blacksmith. And for this forge to work, you need a few things. Much like a campfire, you need a source of fuel, you need an initial source of heat or a spark, and you need airflow. We have all of that right here. Our fuel, or what we are burning in the forge, is this. It is coal. Something we may all know or have at least heard the name of, but we still use it in our forges today. For our initial heat source, historically, if you wanted to use a piece of flint and steel, that works just fine. By the end of the 19th century, matches are a thing that exists in our world. So we use matches today. And for airflow, and Molly, if you want to maybe scoot down a little bit and catch the bellows up above, I have this handle here, which is connected to a set of bellows, much like what you would find in a fireplace, just much larger. So when I pull on that handle, you can see it raising and lowering that bellows, which funnels air down the back of the chimney into the pit of the fire and up through the center to create a really nice airflow that allows our forges to get close to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the hottest temperature in there. It will bring our steel to a working temperature of somewhere between 2,200 and 2,800 degrees. So it gets awfully hot in here. I will say though, I prefer to be blacksmithing over the summer. Most of the heat escapes right out of a chimney, so I can stand right here at my forge and be perfectly comfortable. Over the winters, because so much of that heat is escaping out of the chimney, you are staring at this really hot fire, hoping it will heat up the room, and it's just not making that much of an impact. So I would open it up again. Does anybody have any questions thus far in here? And I think we will actually make our way out of this shop and back out onto the street so you can get a full street view of the seaport and maybe kind of treat it like a window into the 19th century. We can find a spot where there should not be any modern interference in view, and you will be able to see the seaport, I think, as it was intended. So what you are looking at right now is what I would call our water street. And this street features many of our historical trades. So not just our shipsmith. A couple of doors down, we have a nautical instrument shop. That is where you could find your compasses, chronometers, sextants, any of the tools that you may need while you are at sea on a ship like the Charles W. Morgan behind me. Further down from there, we have a print shop where we do still operate 19th century printing presses. Information defines our world, and being able to publish regular newspapers, put out job listings or advertisements is something that's going to be really important in this town.
We have two questions
Yes.
about the shipsmith.
Absolutely.
So, except for the brick chimney, is this building mostly wooden?
Yes, it is. It is, I think, entirely wooden except for the masonry and a sand floor. That sand floor, so the story or the legends here at Mystic Seaport goes, was dirt taken from its site in New Bedford, Massachusetts. So perhaps even some of the remaining dirt is even original.
And then we also have, did they have apprentices? How many years to learn the trade?
Yes, so apprenticeships are certainly something that would happen in a town like this and in shipsmithing. A typical apprentice for a blacksmith is somewhere between 7 and 10 years. It is going to be a long process to become a master at that trade. Blacksmithing is difficult. To make products that are not only functional, but will not break or snap on you, and are also marketable, right? The work of a blacksmith has to be beautiful as well. So it takes a lot of time and a lot of dedication to get to that point. I would consider myself a very, very amateur blacksmith. And in this shop, I have had groups of kids or students, as well as for myself, making simple wall hooks as a project. It is a great beginner project because it teaches you skills you will use in every other project you make.
And we have two general questions about the museum. How many buildings are accessible to enter, and when is the best time to visit?
Ooh, those are great questions. Accessible to entry, I would say just about all of those 60 buildings are. I know our museum has some houses that are lining the street. The ones right on the road are generally offices or administrative spaces, but behind them is where we have this whole village with just shy of 60 buildings that can be entered. And best times to visit, those are some of my favorite questions because I've narrowed this in. The space after like an April school vacation, the end of April, right up until the beginning of June is perfect because schools are still in session. So walking around during the day, you can have a fairly calm experience, except for all of our young visitors on field trips with Molly or myself. So steer clear of us then. But I also love the like late September, early October time of year. It starts to cool down just a little bit, but it is still very comfortable to walk around outside. And you get to experience some of the charm of fall in New England. Maybe grab an apple cider donut while you're at it.
I
So,
agree completely, Anthony.
yeah. So we are going to make our way down the street even further, and we are going to head on board. Probably, I'm very partial to it. I would say the best of those almost 500 vessels we have, the Charles W. Morgan. So as we're walking down the street, I would say take in the view of this beautiful ship, and we will find a good spot to introduce her and what she did to you guys.
So as Anthony's walking along, I just want to let everybody know that all these exhibits that he's walking by, when we are open, we have a group of staff members called interpreters, and they work in each of the buildings. And so as our visitors come to the museum, they can go into each of these buildings and talk about one specific slice of maritime history and what that building is all about. It's looks like a ghost town at this point. It's just so quiet out there right now.
It is always a refreshingly strange experience to be on the grounds with nobody else around. You do kind of lose the hustle and bustle of a town, but it is still just so beautiful and nice out here. So, behind me is what I would call our flagship here at the museum. This is the Charles W. Morgan. She is a whaling ship. So she left New Bedford, Massachusetts in 1941 for the first time, setting out to hunt whales. The whaling industry was huge in the 19th century. It made up a large part of the economy here in New England. Many of our cities are known for it. I've mentioned New Bedford a couple of times. The island of Nantucket is known for whaling. Closer to home, 2 towns over across the river behind me is the city of New London, Connecticut, which was our #1 whaling port. But this ship has a unique story. She leaves New Bedford in 1841 under totally normal whaling circumstances, but ends up having a career that spans about 80 years. This ship whaled right up until the beginning of the 1920s, which was unusual for ships like this. They were worked really hard. They broke. By the 1920s, were fairly inefficient compared to motorized vessels. So the Morgan stays on the water doing her thing for a really long time. They are sailing out, hunting these whales for a purpose, and that purpose is the production of oil. Much like today, oil makes our world go round, and that was true for the 19th century as well, just a different source for that oil. So we think of whale oil, I think typically for lighting lamps, which it was certainly used for. Another use of whale oil that I find is often overlooked is that of an industrial lubricant. When we're thinking of the late 19th century, it is a time of industrialization. There are factories and skyscrapers and a really modern world being built around us. And something has to keep those gears moving. And that something is whale oil. It was even a product that made its way into people's homes as well. One use for whale oil that was very common was as sewing machine oil. And I have a special treat for you guys today. I have with me a bottle of the product in question. So this is a bottle of sewing machine oil from about the 1890s. I suspect it came from the Nye Sewing Machine Oil Company out of New Bedford, Massachusetts. And if you had an oil company in New Bedford, there was a really strong chance you were getting that oil from out in the oceans.
We have one question
Oh, yeah,
about the Morgan.
absolutely.
Seems a bit relevant. Was the Morgan ironclad?
So she is not. She is a wooden ship. She is actually the last 19th century wooden American whale ship anywhere in the world. In her heyday, there were a couple thousand ships like her, but through being scuttled or dismantled and used for other things, the Civil War took a huge toll on the whaling fleet. By 1921, there really were not many ships left like the Morgan. And after that, today, she's the only one of her kind left. So we are going to head up onto the deck of the ship and explore around there a little bit. And then once we're on the deck of the ship, we will certainly take some more questions. So as we are walking, Molly, if you can, do you think you could focus on a point all the way towards the top of the foremast or the frontmost mast of the ship? I am having Molly focus on the hoops. If you can see at the top of that mast 2 metal circles, that is the location where a sailor has to climb and stand for hours at a time looking out for whales. When they see a pod of whales, they are going to alert the rest of the crew, maybe something like a whale ho! And at that point, the ship springs into action. We want to work quickly. We do not want to delay in this process. The ship is going to launch smaller rowboats. Those rowboats are known as whale boats, and they have space for 6 sailors in each of them. In teams of 6, they are going to row out to the whales. Once they have approached the pod of whales, a sailor at the front of the boat, known as the harpooner, takes their harpoon and will drive it into the back of the whale. Now, the whale does not appreciate this very much, I have to say, so it will try to swim away or could come back and smash our boat, or is going to try to sound or dive. And it could be a potentially dangerous situation. In our whaleboat, attached to the back of the harpoon, is about 2,000 feet of line or rope. As we are watching the whale swim away, we're also watching that line run out. We need to keep our catch, and we really do not want that line to go. If it does, it is being pulled with such a force that it could pull taut and really obliterate our little rowboat. If we say we're lucky and we have successfully harpooned our whale, it is the privilege of the officer of this whaleboat to end the whale's life. So he will take up the killing lance and do that. And now we are still in a small 6-person rowboat, and we have a dead whale attached to this boat that is potentially 60 tons in some cases, so 120,000 pounds. And we have to row back to our mothership with this whale, where they will then begin the processing to remove blubber and eventually get our oil. So let's head on to the deck of the ship and take a look around.
So Anthony, as you move along, we've got a question about the youngest sailor on a whaling ship, and were children allowed to work on the whaling ships?
So we have questions
Yes.
about what was the youngest sailor in the whaling boat, and were children allowed to work on whaling ships? There's also a question about how they brought whales in.
Yes. So as far as age goes, we know on board the mothership, the Charles W. Morgan, there is a couple of roles that children could fill. One is employed as a cabin boy, who is generally an attendant to higher officers. Perhaps the captain has a cabin boy to attend to tasks for him. Another option is being the son of the captain. So we have fantastic documentation of some of the people that were on this ship. And one that immediately comes to mind when I start thinking of children is Jamie Earl. His father, Captain James Earl, led this ship in some of its Pacific whaling voyages. And Jamie, who was born in 1896, spent a good amount of time during his childhood on board this ship. He essentially grew up here. There are photos of him with like a little wooden toy gun or toy boats, just enjoying being a kid just right here on the deck of this ship. So if I had to put a number on being a cabin boy, I would say probably on the lower end, maybe in the 9, 10, 11 range. But for Jamie Earl, he was on this ship a little bit younger than that. I will add too, Jamie Earl lived a very long life. And was able to come back to this museum and see the Charles W. Morgan as it is positioned today, and shared some incredible stories with us. The Jamie Earl interviews are things that we refer back to all the time. One story that sticks out in my mind are his mother's 1,000 barrel donuts. So this structure behind me is known as the Try-Works. This is the furnace where they are rendering whale blubber into oil. I usually compare that process to making bacon in the morning. You are starting with chunks of essentially fat, and you are putting them into these cauldrons and lighting a fire underneath and letting it melt and render out and turn to liquid. In the case of this particular story, after a success or reaching a threshold of an amount of oil, hence the name 1,000 Barrel Donuts, Mrs. Earl made do with the Try-Works and essentially turned them into a deep fryer, making donuts in the whale oil. Personally, I cannot imagine that is a super tasty treat, but I think about living on board this ship for years at a time. Your typical whaling voyage is an average of 3 to 5 years. And if that is the hottest, freshest snack I had gotten in years, I am taking it, even if it was fried in whale oil. So I will reference as well the whale boat. I know when we were talking about children, I think the phrasing whale boat was used. I do not foresee children being on the boats for the actual whaling process. It is just really, really dangerous. And you want sailors who know at least a little bit about what they're doing to be doing that job. So I think my best guess would be kids, if they were on the ship, stayed well away from the whale boats themselves. As we move backwards or back on the vessel, there is something that I would like to point out actually embedded in the deck. So Molly, if you can show right there, this little guy. That is a glass hexagon that is embedded into the deck. It is not flat, however. It actually has a almost diamond shape to it, and that item is known as a deck prism. And the deck prism allows light to come into the living quarters or the cabins on the ship. Because it is a whale ship and we are working with highly flammable oil and a furnace with a fire in it, we are going to limit some of our risk and not light multiple lanterns on the ship. We are going to rely on the sunlight being filtered down below deck otherwise.
So
Well, I
Anthony,
am reaching. Yeah,
I just want to give you a heads up. You've got a 5-minute warning.
excellent. So I have just enough time to show off a couple of favorite things. Number one, being a harpoon on its wooden handle. So you can see the full size of this item and maybe imagine being on that little rowboat throwing it. Definitely not something for those that are faint of heart. And we are going to make our way over to the wheel of the ship, which is all the way in the back, which I think is maybe a strange place for it. Why would we put our steering set so far back in a place where I cannot see anything ahead of me? So Molly, can you come right where I was standing and look forward up the ship? If I was sailing, I really could not see anything ahead of me, but I don't really need to. So I have all of the tools that I need at the helm right here. Principally, a human being who is navigating and has charts figured out with where we're going and how we need to get there. I also have a compass inside of this skylight, so I can see it from the wheel and get my directional sense from there. I can also check the wind in my sails through a little skylight right here, allowing me to make sure we are actually catching the wind and doing what we need to do. It will be a team effort. Having sailors stationed in the rigging or in places on the ship where they can relay information back is going to be a huge help as well. It really is a team effort to make any of this possible. So we are going to head back over towards this little workbench that we kind of started at, and I can certainly answer any last minute questions.
All right, I have one for you. Can you explain some of the opportunities that Indigenous people, local Indigenous people, and also people from the Black community would have aboard a whaling ship in the 1800s?
Yeah, absolutely. So we know of many Indigenous and Black sailors on board of whale ships. It is a very difficult job that as the 19th century progresses, less and less, frankly, white Americans want to do it. It also gets kind of a strange reputation. You are not quite the Navy. You are a merchant vessel operating on a different set of rules. So it was a space that a lot of people would turn to who were looking to break into maritime industries or gain experience that could be used on other ships. We know the last captain of the Charles W. Morgan, a man named Theophilos Gonzalez, was a Black man. He came from Cape Verde, which is not anywhere near Connecticut. So it was a diverse place to be. That said, individual sailors certainly maintained their own biases. I would not go so far as to say everybody got along super, super well and they were, all best friends, but the crews of this ship were united by a common goal, and that was to make a profit, be able to return home, and do so while keeping your life. Sailors would often take the opportunity to run away from a ship like this. We know of many deserters. And the Morgan still needs a crew, so it is also picking up sailors around the world. Guam, Peru, the Azores, Cape Verde. It is a truly global industry and is pulling from all of those different places to make that happen.
So why were the voyages so long?
Yes, the voyages are so long because we are going until the ship is full. So down below us, actually 2 levels below us, is the cargo hold that would have many different casks and barrels, all to be filled with oil. Now, it is no guarantee that we will find and hunt a whale every single day. It could take weeks between sightings of whales, and oh no, maybe the line snapped and we lost one, or that whale boat came back empty-handed. There are many opportunities to not be producing oil that led to a lot of downtime for the ship, resulting in voyages taking a long time. As the century goes on and technology catches up, the time goes down, but it's still going to be a really good amount of time to fill up the ship and make it home with all of our oil.
Well, Anthony, I think our time is up. We could hang out here on the ship for hours, and it's what we do all day long. But I know that you folks are probably interested in getting a little dinner right now. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, Anthony's got a little show and tell in his treasure bag.
Yep, I might
Anthony,
retire to my dog watch on the ship with a piece of scrimshaw, carving or etching designs into some souvenir whale teeth from the voyage.
look at you. So, Anthony, thank you so much for taking us around the museum. Molly, you did a
You guys.
phenomenal job without any of our too many freeze ups, and everything looks so good today. Both of you did a wonderful job. Oh, we have a request to show a sunset. I don't know whether you can get there, Molly. It'll be tight.
I know a spot that I have been a couple of times. We're gonna zoom
There
down
he
the
goes.
ship.
He's gonna go running.
Oh gosh, you guys are too good to us.
Oh no, you're not going on the hurricane deck. Oh my goodness.
You said sunset.
Yes, yes. Please be
And
careful.
there it is, the Mystic River with the sun setting.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
So we've been hearing music throughout the whole presentation. What's going on there?
So here at the seaport, we also operate a private marina if you are so inclined to dock your boat with us. And I think a couple of our guests are really enjoying the summer weather and the open air and are playing some music off of their boat.
Wonderful. Okay.
I do want to point out it's later where you guys are. I want to make sure I let you guys go.
Yes.
But one of our patrons, did compliment Molly on her cinematography skills, but also we have gotten an Ask Anthony back and let him speak for as long as he likes. So
He will.
Please, I will happily do that anytime. Let me know.
Barbara, thank you and Anthony and Molly so much for spending your evening and what a wonderful presentation and so much knowledge you've shared and what a beautiful site you guys get to work at. I hope one day I get to make it out to Connecticut and come visit you guys because I got to see all this up close and personal for myself, especially Anthony's. I'll be there tomorrow, especially Anthony's backwards walking skills. I think I need to see that in person myself.
Can we see Molly's face as well?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Nobody hides at our museum. There she is. Thank you, Molly.
Wonderful. Well, Barbara, Molly, Anthony, thank you so much and have a great rest of your evening. And everybody here, thank you so much for coming out. The library needs a bus trip to Mystic Seaport. I don't think we have the budget for a bus trip across the country.
Come on over.
But I hope I've inspired y'all to take a trip out to Connecticut to visit the Mystic Seaport. So from all of us at the Schaumburg Library, we wish the Mystic Seaport Museum and of course all of our patrons a wonderful rest of your evening. And don't forget, our next night with the museum will be August 19th. We'll be back to our normal time of 7 to 8 p.m. and we will be with the Ringling Museum. So we're looking
What?
for
Ooh.
Barb,
That's exciting.
you know what? You guys can sign up to go to that because we let anyone come to our program. So you just go to schaumburglibrary.org/events and you can register and join us. But we'll see
I
y'all
love it.
next time. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.